A very good afternoon to all of you who have joined today. Today's subject is, am I audible?
Yes, please go on.
Yeah, today's subject is the importance of early warnings, particularly in the context of climate change-induced disasters and the local inclusive actions which are required. We have with us Dr. Anshu Sharma, who is a climate and disaster management specialist. He is the co-founder of Seeds India, a firm based in Delhi. On behalf of AIWC, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Anshu to this webinar. We are actually having this webinar in the background of. Let me mute.
मुश्किल से 2 मिनट का ही वो करना.
Let me mute everybody. Okay. Yeah. We are having this webinar in the background of several climate change related disasters throughout the country, like the tragic landslides in Kerala on July 30th, a very tragic one, and the recent floods and other disasters in many parts of the country, like in Gujarat, Uttaranchal, Telangana, and even in Delhi. In Telangana today, its newspaper says a lack of trees have been uprooted. It says nature's fury, but ultimately, on one way or the other, these are all because of the irresponsible human activities in ecologically sensitive areas. On top of it, lack of early warnings and lack of awareness. That makes it even worse. When we talk of Wayanad, Wayanad and Vilangad. Vilangad is a place very near to Kozhikode, just 26 to 30 kilometers away. Both the places, the same type of landslides happened, but it was quite disastrous. In Wayanad, so many were killed. So many lives have been lost. Thousands were rendered homeless, and many families were wiped off. Many children were orphaned. But in the case of Vilangad, a village in Kozhikode, the scene was slightly different. It was also devastating. A number of houses and buildings were completely washed off because of the rush of water and the debris, huge rocks taking them away along. But the loss of life was very minimal there. Only one person died. Hundreds of lives were saved. That was mainly because of what is going to happen. They had early warnings, and they agreed to sort of move from there and to the camps on time. So that was one difference between these two. Of course, Wayanad had three places. Vilangad is, but the disaster was almost the same type. In talking of Wayanad, we have it was for Dr. Anshu's Sharma's information. We have a branch in Wayanad, and they had very actively helped the people there. Going physically there, it is going physically there to hospitals, to camps, and physically helping them all. And our branches also, we are all doing our bit for the rehabilitation, because they already had enough of stuff there, surplus stuff. So we are all collected funds, and we are going to make a contribution during the rehabilitation stage. So actually, when these things happen, several questions come to our mind. Firstly, are we doing enough to increase awareness about all these happenings among the communities? Or are we forgetting this completely once it happens and wait for the next to strike again? Then we again waken up. And another thing is whether the climate change is being given the importance it deserves in school curriculum, and or the children being made aware of these things. All these are the questions which come to our mind. And all these questions led me to organize this webinar with Dr. Anshu, whom I know have extensive knowledge on the subject. And he readily agreed to help us find some solutions. Thank you for that in the first instance. And another thing is today is Teachers' Day. Dr. Anshu suggested that we do this on Teachers' Day. The reason he gave was quite inspiring, that mothers are the best teachers, and being a women led organization, this program will be a tribute to all the members and all the mothers of AIWC. So, thank you for choosing this date also. Now, on our part, we can also learn several things from Dr. Anshu and dedicate it to our teachers and spread whatever knowledge we gather today among the community as well as the children, particularly the children. As we all know, it will definitely go a long way in making them socially responsible and also ready them, alert them for the various challenges of climate change impacts. Once again, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Anshu Sharma to this webinar. Today, we have with us President of AIWC, Madam Kalyani Raj, and Dr. Upasana Singh, Treasurer. Our Secretary General, Dr. Manjukar, has some other engagement, and she said she will join later or watch it on the YouTube. I extend a warm welcome to the office bearers to this webinar. We are quite honored to have our esteemed patrons, Beena Jainji and Sheila Kakreji. I extend a warm welcome to both of them to this webinar. And we have member in charges, Shanti Socrates, Indrani ji, Kuljit ji, and many others, Asha ji. And many of the people will be joining slowly as we start. So I extend a warm welcome to all of them and those who have joined from all other branches from all over India. Before I introduce Dr. Anshu and invite him for the presentation, I would like to request our President, Srimati Kalyani Raj, for her presidential address. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Bhuneshwari, and namaskar, everybody. Welcome, Dr. Anshuji. Thanks for joining us today. And thank you, Bhuneshwari, for arranging this webinar on a very important topic. As you mentioned, so many calamities about in Wayanad and in other places. Nature is really getting beyond our control. And whatever is happening, some of them, they call it man-made, a lot due to climate change right now. But the thing is, we all know that, yes, it is happening. There is something called climate change, which is happening. And in our part, we have only to learn to tackle it at our level, whatever way we can, or adapt to it and try to mitigate it. That's the only part we can do. And being a women's organization, All India Women's Conference, just for the information of Dr. Anshu, we are a 98 years old organization, 97 years old organization working on women's issues, and we have branches across India. And we work on the strength of our volunteer members who implement all our in-house design programs at different levels. So we have also looked at, from the climate change point of view, we have looked at gender aspect, being again the women's organization. We have been focusing on gender part because we do realize how women are differently and disproportionately impacted by the climate change. And 4 branches within India have undertaken a project based on the gender integration into climate change discourse. And the outcome and the recommendations were shared with the local government and all the stakeholders. Workshops were held. And following this, many of our branches have also initiated sort of micro-level women-led solutions to adapt to or mitigate the climate change, which we would definitely like to replicate and scale up, because that's one way of tackling the climate change. And coming to the topic of today, preparedness and disaster management, that's another aspect we definitely need to equip ourselves with, and not as Bhuvaneshwari just said, respond or react to one calamity after one calamity and then sit back and wait for another one to recur. We can't do that anymore because definitely I think the frequency is increasing as well as I think the forcefulness of each climate-induced disaster or man-made disaster, whatever, but the effectiveness is really more now. More and more people are impacted, getting now moving out of their houses and having all sort of loss to the property and human values and life and human values. So the AIWC branches have also been conducting programs on disaster preparedness across India. And I remember earlier we had tied up with NDRF Battalion, who had conducted sort of sessions in many of our branches wherever they had, presence there. And we are also focusing on areas relating to sustainable lifestyle, responsible and economic consumption, and several other related programs which our branches can conduct and at least prepare the community and create awareness among the disasters. But there is always a lot to learn, and thank you once again for sparing your time, Anshuji, for joining us today. And I'm sure your expertise will help all of us to widen our knowledge and help our future work, plan it in a better way. So we are all looking forward to listening to you. And thank you once again, Bhuvaneshwari, for inviting me. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving that brief outline about AIWC and the activities in climate change, particularly. And let me now introduce you all to Dr. Anshu Sharma, our distinguished guest speaker today. Dr. Anshu is a renowned climate and disaster management specialist and co-founder of SEEDS India, Sustainable Environment and Ecological Development Society, which is based in Delhi. SEEDS is an Indian humanitarian organization working in the field of disaster management. This organization had got several awards, like one, the Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose Award, the highest recognition for work in disaster management in India, by the Prime Minister in the year 2021. In 2022, SEEDS had received the UN Sasakawa Award, the highest global award for disaster management from the United Nations. Professionally, he is an urban planner, trained at the School of Planning and Architecture in Delhi. He holds a PhD in Global Environmental Studies from Kyoto University. Dr. Anshu has over 30 years of multi-country experience in coordinating work at community level, training practitioners, interacting with governments and international agencies, and coordinating interagency efforts in the area of humanitarian response and disaster risk reduction, with specific focus on reconstruction and safety of shelters and schools. He has dedicated his career for addressing disaster risk and climate emergency issues, with a focus on transforming vulnerable communities into resilient and thriving ones. Dr. Anshu has undertaken post-disaster needs assessment, recovery planning, risk reduction planning, and capacity building in several countries during earthquakes, tsunamis, cyclones, floods, etc. Throughout his career, Dr. Anshu has responded to over 30 major emergencies across 12 countries. There's a long list of activities, and to save time, I've just given a gist of it. And he has also published several articles in international journals and co-edited influential works on resilience, including the World Disaster Report 2016. In addition to his work with SEEDS, Dr. Anshu has co-founded SEEDS Technical Services, a global research and advisory group focused on scaling resilience group efforts. He's also a co-founder of Resilience AI, a climate tech startup emerging from a Microsoft-supported AI project. Actually, I came to know about Dr. Anshu and his organization when they were involved with the rehabilitation work in Wayanad. during the Kerala floods in 2018 or 19. I also remember to have seen him taken an award from the President of India. There was a clip, I had seen the video clip of his taking one of the awards from the President of India. So actually, we are all awaiting eagerly for your presentation and talk. And I'm sure, as Madam Kalyani ji said, you will be able to tell us more about what our role, what we can do, and how we can cooperate with other agencies and all these things. And we'll look forward to such suggestions and programs and activities, particularly women and children, the areas of women and children where we work, which the branches can. We have over 500 branches, and many branches are involved, and we hope to hear from you. Over to you, Dr. Anshu, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me here. It is a huge privilege for me. I don't come here as an expert today. Each one of you that I can see here has many more years, and I'm sure a very vast canvas of experience, way higher than I do. So I'm here more to share a few of my experiences, some of the things that I've studied, also to learn from you and figure out in a more practical way how an organization like yours can, which is already so influential, can be even more influential in the emerging area of climate change. And as you said, ma'am, we had spoken, and I think we both got very excited about doing this on the 5th of September, which is our National Teachers' Day. I see you, and in all of you, I see literally so many of my teachers. I am what I am because of my teachers. And this is the day to remember that. And as you rightly said, mothers, it reminded me, the women's conference reminded me of how much I've learned. See, 90% of my teachers in school have been women, and very fondly remembered. I'm still in touch with many of them. And it all starts with our own mothers, doesn't it? So my mom, who's in the room next door, obviously my first teacher, and we all learn so much from our mothers. But I was remembering today how from certain sources, you learn what you didn't really expect, unconventional teachers. And I do some work, as you mentioned, and I'll share a few slides about my current work, which is on climate change and the use of artificial intelligence. So I work in the technology space, but I remember probably my first lessons on technology were from my mother, who's not a tech person. She trained as a musician, and but at the same time, in our house, when I was young, we used to have this very old style radio. It was a National Echo radio, which had these walls at the back and a very nice antenna. And mom used to fix that, and I used to assist her. And I guess it just sparked a lot of things. So teaching does not necessarily come as a official teaching process. It comes in many ways. And it's a great day to remember all our teachers. I woke up and wished some of my favorite teachers this morning, and I got blessings again, and I feel great. It's a great day. So thank you for letting me in, in this group. I think where we started, ma'am, you mentioned how most disasters have some human dimension to it. We've contributed to making them worse. In fact, the term that has traditionally been used for these disasters, including landslides and floods and cyclones, is natural disasters. And for the last few years, there has been a very major international campaign against the use of this term. So we don't use the term natural disaster anymore. And if you look online, there is something called UNDRR, which is the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. This is the highest UN body working globally on reducing disaster risks. And they run a very powerful campaign which says, no disaster is natural. And they say what happens naturally is hazards. It may rain, water may flow, but somewhere or the other, we have contributed by coming in the way of these natural events. We have created buildings, highways, dams, drains in the wrong places. And we have contributed into turning these natural events into disasters. So natural are events, at most hazards, but it's us making these into disasters that we see. So that's a good starting point. Let us look at our own actions. And talking of international campaigns, We did speak about talking a little bit about early warnings today, because another problem that everyone's facing, and since we've been involved, you've all read about what happened in Wayanad recently, also in 2018, is that people in the way of harm did not get enough warning. Had they known in advance, they could have got out of harm's way. It just came suddenly. So the other international campaign that runs in this space is called Early Warning for All, because some get warning and some don't. And even when the warning comes, some people understand it and some don't. So that's something I would like to talk about today. Ma'am, you've already introduced me in detail. I'll not talk much about that, but just that I come from this space where I learn, I work a lot with students, I work as a volunteer at Seeds, and I try to do some research in the other spaces that I work. And I think in line with how climate change is progressing, uh, the one thing we all need to do is to constantly try and learn as much and as fast as possible, because we don't know what is happening. We may claim to be experts, and I don't think anyone in this world today is a climate change expert, because nobody knows how this is evolving. Every year, literally every month, we see surprises and we say this is unprecedented. It's a black swan event. We never knew. And the frequency of such unprecedented events is going on increasing. So ma'am, if it's okay, can I share a few of my slides for maybe 20, 25 minutes? I will try to take in that.
Yeah, sure.
And uh, just give me a moment to get this in. And I hope you're able to see my screen, which I've turned into a presentation mode.
Yeah, we're able to see.
So fundamentally, there's a lot of jargon in the climate change and disaster management space, but I think if we boil it down, it just means we all need to hope for the best and we need to expect the worst and be prepared for both. And the worst constantly changes. It is open to interpretation. And let's talk for a few minutes about how do we anticipate the worst. And this image is from Mumbai. I overheard in the beginning, some of you probably are joining in from Mumbai today or are otherwise based there. And this image you would certainly remember. This kind of scenes happened in 2005. I think it was the 26th of July, 2005, when severe flooding hit Mumbai and the region around it. A number of lives were lost. And all of us were a little stunned. I had a number of friends and family members there. I think we all did, and people were stuck and we were making frantic calls, and I work in the disaster management space, so I was getting calls from friends. Hey, my family's stuck, my cousin is stuck, can you help? Can you call someone? In the end, government. And we were all completely helpless and paralyzed. And I think this image was very profound, because till then we were all used to seeing these annual images of floods, which was somewhere in Bihar, or eastern UP or some rural part of the country, where we would see an aerial image of everything flooded, and we would see some thatched huts and a few trees and rooftops, and on the rooftops was a typical rural family with probably a goat or something, and that used to come every year. And severe floods was something that happened to some poor rural people in some faraway remote part of India. And some of us would just, read about it, and some of us would donate to support. It's the first time that flooding of this scale came home to us in our cities where we live, in our neighborhoods. And it was very alarming. Uh, and we thought it's a one-off event. It's just a freak rainfall event, and it has hit Mumbai. But then what happened was, in subsequent years, and I'm sure you would recollect, we started seeing these kind of unprecedented urban floods in many other places. We've seen this in Kochi, we've seen this in Chennai a couple of times, we've seen this in Srinagar, we've seen this in Bhopal. We've seen this in Surat, even very recently. And very quickly, within a span of 15 years, globally, urban flooding became the most expensive disaster, because fewer lives are getting lost as compared to, widespread national flood events. But the losses, the economic losses in these urban floods are very, very high. Uh, And while we were grappling with this, so this image, it tells you, I don't know if any of you have had these incidents in your friend circle or family circle, but I've had a few in the last few years where a car got submerged like this, and when the water receded and they tried to get the car repaired, the repair bill was so high that it was beyond the insurance, and it almost came to like it's better to just junk the car and buy a new one with whatever insurance money you get. So, and a lot of this does not get accounted for, when we account the cost of floods, it doesn't get accounted, and all the damage that would have happened with the water entering those houses that we see in the background, a refrigerator underwater, a television set junked, mattresses spoiled for good. And then these happen worst in the lowest income areas, in the slums and the low income colonies that are usually on the lowest lying land. They don't have a second floor to take refuge in. uh, and almost all of these losses are private, and they are uninsured. So they don't hit our GDP. It's very difficult to get figures, facts and figures about them, but we know that they are huge through the estimates. Now, while this flood story is evolving, this was another image, and there were quite a few. This is from 2018 from Cape Town. And this is when, for the first time, we all heard the term day zero. Day zero is when officially in a city, water gets over. And the city government says that we don't have water to supply to our people. The taps run dry. And Cape Town hit day zero in 2018. We were still trying to understand what does that mean? How will a city survive without water? What kind of emergency measures will be done? Taps running dry is declared as a disaster. And then in 2019, Chennai hit day zero, and Shimla hit day zero. And it hit so bad that uh, in the summers, when the economy of Shimla is at its peak and all the hotels are overbooked, hotels had to cancel bookings en masse, and they were all calling, telling their customers not to come to Shimla because there was no water in the city, and there's no way they could get it from even nearby places. So, these are kind of apocalyptic scenarios which we have, seen in movies, read somewhere, but we don't feel it'll happen to us. And even if we do, we don't think it'll happen right now. It may be somewhere distant in the future by when we'll have a solution. But it is happening right now all around us. As on date, we don't know when my house, my neighborhood, or yours is either going to get flooded, or our taps are going to run dry. And we don't know how we're going to deal with it, because it's not just us, it's many other people. And the next thing that is hitting us way faster than anything else in the climate space is heat, extreme heat. And then there's a problem that when we say climate change, the image that one gets is that the climate is changing incrementally, a few degrees every year or points every year, and we will learn how to manage. But that's not how it is happening. It is changing very erratically. Something happens one year, something opposite happens the other year. Something happens in one district. There's a district that is under severe floods in India, and the neighboring district is having a drought. In fact, it used to be a joke, but it's now so real that you call a friend in the same city where you are, and you say it's raining heavily, and your friend says it's not raining, it is bright and sunny. You're just making an excuse because you don't want to come and meet me, right? That's happening in our city. There are parts of a single city that is getting flooded, and there's another part that is nice and clean and dry. This image is from Delhi, where I come from. We are currently working with Delhi government on a climate strategy, which has two parts. One is to make Delhi carbon neutral so that we don't emit greenhouse gases. And the other is to prepare for what kind of disasters are coming our way. Last year in May, West Delhi, which you see in deep red on the image to your right, reported 53 degrees Celsius in land surface temperature. It didn't make big news. This year, Delhi made big news because our weather stations reported 50 degrees Celsius. And let me tell you that, when we say an average, all of these figures are averages, whether you are in Trivandrum or Delhi, Chennai, wherever you are. When we say Delhi is 50 degrees, there are parts, there is about 12 to 15 degree range in different neighborhoods of Delhi. So there's one part of Delhi that will still be about 40 degrees. And there's a part of Delhi which will be hitting 55 degrees. And we move around. We move around with thermometers and what we call as data loggers, where we take highly calibrated, readings. And we see that all the time. So, and we tell people, don't assume that if it's 40, it's good enough. That your neighborhood could be much hotter, and there could be other problems. And at this point, let me also tell you, we've all been there, that your car was parked in the sun for a couple of hours. When you open the door, it feels really hot inside. And I don't know about all of you, but I remember earlier, a few years ago, we used to roll the windows down and wait for a few minutes. But life has become so fast that nowadays we don't have those few minutes to wait. So we try to jump in and turn on the AC and put it on full blast and assume that it'll cool down very fast. And, let's start moving because I don't have the time. So we put a data logger in a colleague's car, which was a black car, parked outside our office in RK Puram for a couple of hours. And the thermometer reported 67 degrees Celsius in the month of April. 67. So imagine what you do to your body when you move from an air-conditioned room, which might be at 27, 28 degrees, and you walk out, and in less than 2 minutes, you jump into 67. You're putting every organ of your body, starting from your skin and your eyes, through such a shock. It's only going to be some more time before we learn what that incremental shock keeps doing to us. And we've stopped giving heed to the fact that your eyes are smarting or they start watering because life has become so fast, and so time is so precious. And in Delhi, we are seeing, so just in the last 5 years, on an average summer, we used to get about 3 to 4 heat waves, and now we're getting 17 to 18 heat waves. But I'll talk a little more about this a bit later. I'll not go into details. The only message that I'm trying to do is we dug out a lot of data from different states on rainfall, right? And we've done this for heat also. We do this for a lot of data points, but I'm just sharing the average rainfall. And you must have read, very often we say that, oh, the monsoon is delayed and we didn't get enough rain in the months of July and August, but it'll rain fairly well in September, and eventually the monsoon will be normal. And in the end, we say, oh, we had a normal monsoon, right? A monsoon once delayed can never become normal, because the farmer who needed water, for his crop at the time when he needed it, didn't get it. And then to catch up when it rained so much in the latter weeks, it rained enough to flood places. So you literally had a period of drought and you had a period of flood, but you add them together, and then statistically, our meteorologists would, friends would say, oh, we had a normal rainfall. The same goes for heat. And what we're seeing here is, if you look at the larger image on the right, in case it's readable, this is last year, I think, Jammu and Kashmir reported a 12% surplus in its annual rainfall. But the district of Kargil was a deficit by 62%. A deficit of 62% means literally you had 1/3 of the rainfall that you normally get. And you can imagine what happens to the farmers. And then Bandipur had 180% of its normal rainfall. You can again imagine what would have happened to settlements that are low-lying in that place. And the same story for every state, every single state tells us the same story. So there is also a joke, a statistical joke, that if your head is in the refrigerator and your feet are in the oven, your average body temperature would be normal. Right? So that is how we often look at facts and figures and statistics. And hence, back to our theme for today, when we say early warning for all, we need to understand data. We don't have to be scientists. This is not rocket science. We need to understand data, what rainfall means, what heat means, what winds mean, just for where we live and where we are going to move around. And very briefly, so this is an image from a simulator, and I'm switching gears to talk a little bit about disaster management. It's a simulator for a aircraft, and you get these online also on our computers and phones, flight simulators. My nephew plays with this all the time. So the thought was that some of us are, and I know people, and I have been scared of flights, especially when there's turbulence. And we're never scared of getting into our car and driving away, to the market or to meet somebody. Although flying is perhaps the safest means of transport. If you look at the number of miles people fly and the number of people who fly and the number of air crashes you have as a proportion, it's one of the safest ways of traveling. And getting in your car and moving in your city is one of the riskiest ways of traveling. India loses 150,000 lives every year to road accidents. That is more than all disasters and all other kinds of accidents put together. One life is lost every 17 minutes. By the time we are done with this session of ours, probably 4 or 5 people would have died unexpectedly, suddenly in road accidents in the country. And all of this is completely avoidable, kind of, you know, deaths. And the numbers are kind of numbing. Statistics, 150,000. Every single life we can imagine, it must be such a tragedy for that family, which will suddenly hear that, okay, there's someone who just went out this morning and he's not coming back home today. It's a lifelong tragedy. And why it happens is because when you train someone to fly an aircraft, there is thousands of hours of training. And it goes on, even mid-career. And they train for everything. This simulation scene shows you how there's an explosion and there's a fire. They talk about stalled engine. They train about hijackings. They train about storms, lightning strike, crashes, everything. In our car driving, we never train people for this. हम तो बोलते हैं शुभ शुभ बोलना चाहिए, एक्सीडेंट की बात क्यों करते हो ना, गाड़ी put it in the fourth gear, drive in the lane, you're driving well, here's your license. We don't train our children and ourselves for when things will go wrong. And then what happens is, if you look at this, and this thought took me to this slide from a website called Our World in Data. If we look at global deaths of human beings caused by animals, the highest number, close to 8 lakh people die every year from mosquito bites. That's dengue, chikungunya, malaria. Humans kill more than 500,000 people. Dogs kill 13,000 people every year. We are so many of us are fond of petting dogs, even street dogs. We are so scared of tigers. They kill 50 people globally in a year. And sharks, we probably are the most scary. And those of us who live close to beaches go often. We've seen all the movies, we've seen the Jaws, and we're so scared about sharks. Sharks kill on an average 4 people across the world every year. There's so much of, misconceptions in our minds around risk. And that translates to all kinds of risks, including how we drive, how we cross roads, and how we deal with weather and the changing climate around us, how we prepare ourselves for it. And I live in Delhi. And I have a daughter who's just turned 9. She was born in 2015, which was 2015 and 2016 were amongst the worst years for air pollution in North India. And I completely went crazy that year. I had bought these devices and I was measuring air pollution everywhere. And these are associated risks that will keep coming. It's not just about Delhi. You may be in any city of the country today, and I can assure you, the air that you breathe for most days of the year is not good enough. So we said it's hot and it's getting hot and it's getting hotter really faster. I'll not talk about a lot of the graphs, but this is some of the data that we culled out on projections. And I hear, and I feel so great that the conference engages, all of you engage so much with the COP process. So this is from IPCC. And I was looking at the figures for North India and Delhi, where I am. So the figures run in, okay, so there are two ways in which we look. One is based on our actions, how bad will things get in the future? And these are called representative concentration pathways, or RCP. And that is how much of energy the earth will continue to absorb from the sun and hold back, right? So if we do a lot of good things, which really sounds impossible right now, we can in theory follow what is called RCP 2.6, which is a lot of these things will get controlled. And if we continue business as usual, we will be on RCP 8.5, which means that things are going to get much worse. But with some efforts, and the realistic line we take is a RCP 4.5 line. If we take that line and if we take a horizon from now till 2100, and 2100, so I'll digress for a moment and say why the year 2100 is important is, so I said I talked about my daughter. My daughter was born in the year 2015. My father turned 85 that year. And dad has been amazingly good. He exercises, does his pranayams, very healthy living. And at 85, he was very fit, taking care of all his needs and many of our needs. And it struck me, and I'm trained as an urban planner. So it struck me that, we make all our urban plans for 20 years. So there is a plan for 2040. There is a vision document for 2050. Now we have said that by 2070, we will try to go net zero, which means we won't emit too much carbon. But that's also just a statement. We don't have a plan for it yet. We have no plans for 2100. But if my dad is fit at 85, my daughter's going to be 85 in the year 2100, and this world does not have a plan even for the lifetime of our own children, or some of you who are older than me, maybe your grandchildren. We don't have a plan for them. We have a plan only for our little vision of, maximum 20 years. So that is a worrying piece. And then coming back to IPCC, we say between now and 2040 is the short term, 2040 to 2070 is the midterm, 2070 to 2100 is the long term. I'll talk about the midterm, which means about in the decade of the 2040s, which is about 25 years from now. Heat waves, which are on an average duration of about 8 to 10 days so far, will be running 30 to 50 days at a stretch. And temperatures in the Delhi region will be higher by about 5 degrees Celsius. Right? So I'll talk a bit about why the duration is important. We normally talk about the maximum temperature, and we often don't look at the minimum temperatures when we are talking about heat and heat waves, because obviously the maximum is way higher. But let me share with you that the maximum number of deaths from extreme heat happen on the hottest nights, not the hottest days. And that's because the human body has the capacity to deal with a few hours of heat, but then it needs respite at night. And when it doesn't get that respite, it goes into all kinds of problems. And similarly, when you deal with a heat wave, you can handle a week of, excessively hot days, and then you get respite. This year, the Indian Meteorological Department had already announced at the beginning of the summers that heat waves, which are normally of 8 to 10 days duration, will be 18 to 20 days duration. And that is what we experience. We experience a really long heat wave, and people did not get respite, and that had all kinds of issues. And imagine a heat wave of 30 days. Crops will burn, yields will drop, water scarcity will be huge. And we are talking only 15, 20 years from now. We are still not talking about my daughter's future or your daughters or grandchildren's future. So there's clear data, and we need to understand this data. We need to get someone to simplify this data and tell it to us so that we can make sense of it. Related to heat, the next thing that happens is when I was a child, I was told don't go out and play during the day because it's too hot. And even till date, the government advisory says, between 12 and 4, don't go out, cover your head, drink water, stop doing outdoor labor. A more recent problem that we are seeing is indoor heat. Because of the kind of environment we've created in our neighborhoods, very little greenery, because of the kind of building materials we use, a lot of glass, a lot of stone, a lot of concrete. I'm sure those of you who still have roots back in the rural setting and have homes there would feel the difference, whenever in the summers when you go there. Our buildings, our neighborhoods, and our cities have become excessively hot, so hot that it is hotter indoors than outdoors, and especially for those who can't afford to run air conditioners 24/7. So when we did these again with the data loggers, the experiments, on a typical day when the temperature outside in a city like Delhi is about 38 degrees Celsius, the indoor temperature in a slum house, a little shack with a tin sheet roof and walls, bamboo walls, is upwards of 45 degrees Celsius, 45 degrees indoors. And we are giving the advice, oh, din mein bahar mat jayega, loo lag jayegi. And who's indoors during the day? Especially in these kind of settlements, it's infants, their mothers, pregnant women, old people, sick people, people with disabilities. And they have nowhere to step out. They can't open their doors and go out and sit in a shaded area. There are no shaded areas. There are no trees and no parks in most of these places. We talk about urban heat island. Cities, because of the concretization, are about 5 to 6 degrees hotter than the rest of the countryside around them. If you drive 50 kilometers outwards, it will be much cooler. Within cities, slums are about 6 degrees hotter than the rest of the city. And within slums, indoor is hotter than the outdoors. What have we done to our living spaces? So we did this, set of, it's kind of experimental, but we are supporting a nonprofit called Chintan, headed by a very dynamic friend, Bharti Chaturvedi, in Delhi, and they work in a number of other cities with low-income communities and very specifically with communities that recycle waste. And they came and said their communities are facing this problem, especially the women's group that they work with are facing this problem. What can we do? They had heard that there are groups going around painting roofs white, and that helps. And our experiments say, and their work and their conversations also told us that it doesn't really work beyond a point. It may reduce your temperature by a degree or two, but then many of these homes don't have roofs that you can paint, and they put stuff on their roofs and they use them. So it was not helping much. And we got into this mode of saying that, okay, 80% of the heat gained in a house is from the roof. If instead of just painting it white, of course, we can paint it white also, but if we create insulation, this is how our traditional houses were. You had mud tiles, or you had what we call mud fusca roofs, where you create thicker wall that would heat up slowly. And then by the time they start giving off heat in the evening, you can open your doors and windows and ventilators, and they would then cool off with air. So keep that temperature down. So we said it can't be expensive. So we looked at a lot of the recycled material. They are recyclers. So we looked at jute and bamboo frames and discarded tarp. And of course, we had to make sure that it doesn't become a fire risk. And we did a number of models, and we tried to do things. And then we put these little data loggers inside. Oh, sorry, let me show you. So in the circles you are seeing, that little device is the data logger I keep talking about. Every 15 minutes, it will record the temperature and humidity. And in some of them, it records light also, because we are trying to reduce heating, cooling, and lighting, consumption, energy consumption in these houses. And so here on the right, you see the graphs and the data from these loggers. And on this particular day, in the month of May, we had 3 houses where we had installed these different kinds of, optional roofs, insulation. And there was one house, which we call a control house, where we did not install anything, so that we can compare the 4. So when the outdoor temperature on that day was about 39 degrees, the indoor of the house where there was no intervention was 45.8 degrees Celsius. And in the other houses, we could achieve 10 to 12 degrees of cooling. And this was a great win. We were only advisors. This was a great win and work that Chintan did in a number of slums in Delhi. And Chintan, as I said, works with the women in these slums, and they, I thought, very creatively call them climate sakhis, in this campaign. So these women led all of this. We installed a little weather station in the slum. A young, group, boys and girls would pitch in, and they would do the tech part. They would take the readings, and they would put the reading out there on a little board in a central square. And then what we started doing, what you see on the chart here, and these 2 women studying, is the heat index chart, right? So on your phones, you would have seen nowadays, the phone has started saying it's going to be 40 degrees, but it feels like 45, or it's going to be 30 degrees, but will feel like 40 degrees. That feels like is indexing. And the Indian Meteorological Department started doing indexed warnings only last year. It used to happen internationally earlier, but we started last year. And we're so glad we did, because there is a huge confusion or a misunderstanding around heat. So we feel that if it's 49 degrees, it's really bad. It's hot. Don't go out there. And if it's 35 degrees, then it's fine. 35 is pleasant. It's cool. But the one element we don't count is humidity. Heat hits you when humidity gets added to it. And that happens because when it's really hot and dry, you will sweat, and your sweat will evaporate, and that will cool your body down, your skin down, and your body down. When the humidity is very high, the air does not absorb any more moisture from your skin. So your sweat does not help you, and your body cannot cool. And at that point, your body starts cooking. Your body cells start cooking in their own heat. So now, if you look at the chart, and I don't know if it will be readable enough on your screens, but a 49 degrees temperature with a 10% humidity, which is what you would find in the dry summers, gives you a feel like, or a factor of 47. So that's in the yellow range, and you need to be careful. It's an alert. But a 35 degrees with a 80% humidity, which happens a lot, it is happening right now in many parts of the country, is way more dangerous, because then if you talk about the feels like, you're above 50 degrees, you're close to 58 degrees Celsius, and your body is not cooling down, and your cells are cooking, and we don't feel it because we say, oh, it's 38, thodi ummas hai, this is a season of humidity, let's drink some water. No, it's way more dangerous than 49 degrees, and we need to get that understanding in, which is what Chintan does with these climate sakhis, and we stand behind them and work with them. So this is how, besides the homes, they also, so what they're doing here is they took a net and they've taken old clothes and they just weave them in the net and they create, when they don't have shading, they in the squares, they create this kind of street shading. And that helps cool temperatures down by about 10 degrees Celsius. They on the right, you see kids who are doing, we run these innovation campaigns. And ma'am, this is something we can certainly, plug in and support the All India Women's Conference do is with these kind of women, with these kind of children, we run these campaigns. We say innovation campaigns. So come up with an idea, it's the world of innovations and startups. Come up with an idea of what can be done. And then these young kids come with amazing thoughts. So this girl who had seen that, the shop that sells cold drinks keeps the cold drinks in a thermocol box to keep them cooler for longer. And she thought thermocol is a good insulator. So what she did was she collected a lot of waste thermocol and some jute gunny bags, and she wrapped the thermocol around the overhead tank in her house. Because in the summers, the water becomes so hot, you can't shower, you can't use that water, boiling hot water in the Delhi region. And suddenly the water in her house became very usable. And she became a local celebrity because she had found a way to, without spending a lot of money or buying an expensive white Syntex tank or insulated tanks, she found a way to insulate her water tank. So we do these kind of little things and then we talk about how they help. Now, I'll just take a few moments to talk about some of the work I do. Bhuvneshwari ma'am had introduced that I work on this climate and AI piece. So this is where, there is AI sounds so big, but I can tell you, you're already using it. You may or may not realize, but it's there on your phone in a huge way. Of course, it's there when you order anything and the person finds his way through to your place. But where we work is, and I don't know if you did this, but I remember the first time I opened Google Maps and I clicked this button that turns a satellite image on and I zoomed in to my house. I was very pleasantly surprised with the level of details that I could see. I could see the overhead tank, the little kitchen shaft, the front, gate, a car parked in front. I don't know whose car it was, and I was trying to guess. So there's so much of detail that you can see about your house on your phone. You can see every house of the world on your phone with the same amount of detail. That's about 2 billion houses across the world. And the house tells you a lot. It tells you the image on the left, it's from Puri. It tells you how big or small it is. If it's a lot of very, very tiny houses packed together with low space, then it's a slum. If it's less than 12 to 15 square meters in size, then it doesn't have a toilet inside, so it won't even have a water tap inside. And we can read so much information about where the flooding will happen, which neighborhoods will be the hottest, if a storm comes, which roofs will blow off and which ones will survive. So we do that kind of an assessment. I would do it manually and it would take me years, but that is where we train these computer models and programs, which we call AI models, to run this kind of assessment really fast and tell us which houses are at greater risk, which families are at greater risk, and what needs to be done. And in the Indian context, we have about more than a dozen different kind of rooftops, which we use as proxies, and we try and identify. So if it's a settlement near a river or a seaside, we would look at what that hazard is, what wrong can happen, what can come from outside, like a storm or a flood or a heat wave, how exposed this house is, how many surfaces, what materials are exposed. And then what is the vulnerability? What is the weakness in the house? Does it have good walls, a good roof, a secure boundary and whatever? And we add all of this up and we say, this is the composite risk for a family. And that's how then we run this at scale and we keep identifying pockets that are at risk. And then we go down and do that. So that is the tech part of it. But on the human part of it, which is the more important part of our work, is then we translate this technology into what we call local impact warning. So right now, you may get a meteorological warning that it's going to be very hot in your city next week, 2 days of heat wave. But now there is a local volunteer who will come and say that there will be a heat wave, but your lane is particularly going to be, impacted because of there's no greenery and the kind of stuff that is there. And these houses will be excessively hot indoors, but there are a few safer buildings nearby or pockets. So during the day, you can migrate there. Or if a cyclone is coming in, and we worked in Puri with that, some of these images are from there, we can say that not all houses will get impacted, but these people must certainly take great care. So we break a forecast down into very local warnings, and then we convert those local warnings into what damage it will have. So now instead of telling you that there'll be very heavy rainfall in your city, ma'am, We can tell you that outside your house at 7 p.m., there will be 2 feet of water. Your car may get submerged and get damaged. So please remove it to a safer place. That's the level of improvement that is happening, and the technology is there. And why it's important is because as of now, we get to know that, oh, there will be 200 millimeters of rainfall. I don't know what 200 millimeters of rainfall in my city means for me. Or it'll say 200,000 cusecs of water is being released from a dam upstream, from of Wayanad. Now, a cusec is a cubic foot per second, which is about 28 liters per second, multiplied by 200,000 is being released. What does it mean to me? What do I do with that information? So that's what we try to translate and bring to people. I will now just take the last few minutes to show you some images from how we take this to people. This is from Leh. We used to run a climate school there after a flash flood in 2010, where children make these models, and we sit the models and understand why the flooding happened. When it comes next time, what can be done better to save ourselves? The kids can give local weather advisories. This is from a school in Sikkim. The children are standing outside. They've taken some readings and they're putting out a advisory for the village out there. And to get to the advisory, they use these very low-end equipment to measure the weather. It's a barometer. They are measuring, learning how to measure air pressure that can tell them about incoming storms, about wind vanes, and anemometers to learn about wind. And this is what we call a sunny weather lab. It's a little lab that the school runs where they learn about local weather. They tally it with the Met warnings, and they tell the local community about what to expect and what is changing. This is something we did in Delhi with a girls' school, government girls' school. We again learned from an organization here called the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, who used to do Makhi Machhar maps. And these are great because then in this weather, you can learn where the mosquitoes are breeding so that you can take care of that and avoid malaria, chikungunya, dengue kind of issues. So we did those walking in the school campus, then around the school. And then we said there are some, rooftop tanks that are without lids or water collecting somewhere. Let's fly a drone. We can't reach all the roofs, but we can take some pictures and learn. Some of this is for fun. Some of this is to inspire the children. You can see the joy on their faces. And some of this is to teach them that, hey, there is a future where the human side and the technology side have to come together to make your lives better. So that's what we do. This is from Barmer, an area that is affected by droughts, but then also floods. Suddenly in 2006, unprecedented floods that we spoke about, unprecedented events. This is a group of adolescent girls that we work with through a local non-profit organization called Unnati. And the only thing we did was we started a community radio program. They would record, edit a radio program that would be aired through All India Radio, the local channel. And this is, as you would understand, a very orthodox community. And the adolescent girls going out and asking opinions from people on how they feel the weather's changing and what needs to be done and on the climate and the recent floods and the droughts. Just the discourse made such a huge change. And it really helped there. And this is in Bihar, a bit outside the Patna region, in where the Ganges floods every year. And again, this is how we translate the warnings on the ground. So instead of telling these people that there is a few thousand cusecs of water being released from a dam in Nepal, or telling them that there's going to be 200 millimeters of rainfall or 250 millimeters, you install these scales, you do the calculation, and you say that by 7 a.m. tomorrow, the water will be till this level, which means the water will be at the threshold of the village temple. Now you can figure out whether your house will be underwater or not and what you should do about that. Precise warnings. And very lastly, this is a woman called Satyavati. She's in a slum in Puri, Pentakota, and we've worked with her. This became a case study because we had given an early warning to her. She would not have evacuated because they get warnings of cyclones every year, a number of times. But she paid heed to what we were telling her through our local partners, Spandan, a very credible local nonprofit in Orissa. And when they communicated, she paid heed, she evacuated, and she saved herself, her assets, and she could come back after the cyclone and set up her little tea stall again. And Satyavati's interpretation was that, every year there are cyclones and I get warnings about cyclones. But what I want to know is, what will this cyclone do to my house? And the moment she asked that question, then the world, science and technology needs to work for her, because every cyclone is different and it changes every few minutes. And every house is different and it has a different level of vulnerability. And that's the level of understanding we need. How we do it will have to be many, many layers of actions that organizations like yours and ours and the governments and the Met Department need to take. So very lastly, I'll just conclude with this, ma'am. What does it mean to us? And I now come to the term resilience, which we use a lot in our work. Resilience, colloquially means the ability to bounce back. So I also always used to think if a disaster has hit a community, how will the community bounce back? Let us help them do that, and that would be resilience. But then I learned later, and this is a definition I use from the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. And the Red Cross says that resilience is the ability to anticipate, absorb, and adapt. And anticipate is all this early warning business. If I know what is going to happen to my family, I will be able to take steps in advance. And when I don't get that information or I don't have the knowledge, then the recent Wayanad landslide kind of a tragedy happens. So the ability to anticipate is something in which we have, as a society, not invested enough. And the early warning for all discourse is all about this. And we need to join hands and be able to anticipate and help the most vulnerable people anticipate. And then we need to build their defenses so that they can absorb these shocks when they come. And after that, we need to learn from these repetitive shocks so that we can change our systems and we can adapt to a future that is right now seeming very uncertain. But I'm very confident that with our abilities and our inbuilt, ability to survive, we have that survival instinct, which is why our generations before us have survived all kinds of risks and brought us till this point. We will overcome it and should be able to be all right with all our efforts. So I'll pause here. Thank you very much for your patient listening. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I have a couple of thoughts on what we can do beyond this, but I think that can be woven into an interactive session. So, ma'am, Bhuvneshwari, ma'am, if you think it's okay, uh, we can just hear if there's any question, if there's any advice for me also, or any ideas that you have that can help me improve my work. I'll be equally, privileged on this day to learn from here and go back. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that elaborate presentation. And we really have learned a lot about several things which are simple, but we never understood. Those are the things like you spoke about how it is not natural disasters. That's it should not be told natural disasters. It's all so such things like what the time that how fast we should learn things. Things are evolving and very, very frequency is increasing. That's one thing we should act fast now. Then, of course, it is very nice to see your work on AI. We always think AI is a hindrance to our privacy, but then it can be used properly and you're able to do the early warnings and help people using that. That will something good. And we're sure we are going to cooperate with you and, we'll work out something with AIWC branches and Delhi also. We can work together and do something which is for the early warning and for climate change in general. Yeah, this one more thing I want. Actually, you talked about the Cape Town thing. We just had in May. We had a webinar on water scarcity in Bangalore city. So how it's going to be like Cape Town. That was I was remembering about that. And you, of course, I could see that you were working with women and children and in schools. And you can help us during the discussions. Maybe you can, like you said, you can help us how we can do what we can do in the schools, such things. You can elaborate on that further about your school work and children. So now before opening the floor for the interactions, I would request our treasurer Upasana Singh ji to say a few words, please.
Yeah, thank you, Bhuvneshwari ji. Thank you for giving me this chance. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience listening to Dr. Anshu Sharma. And he explained so well about the early warning systems and the impact of. I hope I am audible.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So early warning systems are put in a place to analyze and identify potential weather and climate related risks and hazards, which was very brilliantly explained by Dr. Anshu Sharma. And he cited the example of Wayanad in the end of his presentation, which has, shook all of us. It was such a shock to everybody that the river has changed her path suddenly, and we only read in the stories that rivers change their paths due to this climate change and all, but this is an eye opener for all of us. And I think that early warning systems are urgently needed as climate change is causing more frequent, extreme, and unpredictable climate related hazards. And I completely agree with you. And the number of disasters has increased fivefold over the past 50 years. And only half of the world's country have access to multi-hazard early warning systems. That is also a very harsh truth. And in particular, loss of life due to hazards in increasing in small island developing states and least developed countries, those who are most vulnerable to the consequences of climate changes. And there is one abbreviation which is already used very frequently, CREWS, climate risk and early warning systems. Hello. The early warning system is an adaptive measure for climate change using integrated communication systems to help communities prepare for hazardous climate related events. A successful EWS saves lives and jobs, as you rightly said, that cars and refrigerators and all the electronic equipments, they are drenched in water and they become useless, and infrastructures and supports long-term sustainability. Early warning systems will assist public officials and administrators in their planning, saving money in the long run and protecting economies. So we look forward to your expertise and your guidance. And I'm sure that AIWC, with all the branches and all the members all over India, will work together. And I think we will be able to bring some change. So all the best. Thank you so much for such a brilliant presentation. And we look forward to more such webinars. Thank you, Dr. Anshuji.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Pasnaji. We have Binaji is there. I would like to, before I open the floor, no, I think our patrons are not there. And shall I open the floor for discussions, please? Ushaji, would you like to say something?
Well, I have a question, Bhuvneshwari ji.
Yeah, sure.
Can I ask?
Yeah, please.
So I have a question, Dr. Anshu Sharma. Kindly give your view on this. That there is always a conflict between development and nature. So what is the path in between? Because right now also there is such a hue and cry when our government is making metros, they are making corridors, and they are cutting trees, and they are making these national highways on the hills like Uttarakhand, like Joshimath. The hill is it is in a very bad shape. So what is the path that we as a common people can do? Because we have very limited power. We can only use like small thing, like don't use polythene, plantation and all these things. But I think we need more force to protect nature. So what can we do as a common man?
Right, ma'am. That's I knew I was telling Bhuvaneshwari, ma'am, that I'm afraid difficult questions will come today, and that's a really profound, difficult question. But let me share my thoughts on that. And this takes me to, this it's a slightly jargon that we use a lot in our reports called sustainable development, and there are the sustainable development goals. And someone very rightly once said that sustainable development is an oxymoron. If you are going to develop things, you are certainly going to do some harm. It is impossible to go on developing without doing, some level of harm. But ma'am, in fact, Upasana ma'am, aapne to in your, words, you also said so many things. You have facts and figures, so you've shared more than I did, and thank you for that. But you remind me of another person, a very senior lady called DD Contractor. Unfortunately, she's no more. She passed away in the COVID phase. And she used to do this. She built these, used to do mud houses in Himachal near Dharamshala. And there's a beautiful village that she had where she had worked. It is still there, and a non-profit called Dharmalaya works there. Ma'am, sometime we can even figure out if, even in AIWC, we can have some kind of a collaboration to on sustainability. But right now I'm reminded that one morning I had gone to visit her. I was sitting in her place. She was, by origin, she was a British person, settled and living and working here. And she was rattling things, and she said something which was fairly crude, but it still sticks with me. She says, my definition of sustainability is that the amount of shit one person produces in a day is the amount of nutrition that is required to grow food for one person for one day. And that is a cycle that can go on infinitely. It has been going on for tens of thousands of years, which is why we are all here, right? And what we've done is, as a society, we've disrupted that because now we are consuming way more than our environment can provide, and we are producing way more waste than it can consume. Now, your question was, what can you do as an individual? And I completely resonate with your thought. It feels very frustrating. मैंने तो plastic नहीं use किया. I reduced my waste, but what am I? Because my entire city is going in the opposite direction. Consumption is crazily high, and I guess there, I can only think of three things. One is that not to lose track and at least control our own consumption and waste production. Secondly, disseminate the way we were talking, about working with, and your organization is a classic organization, close to 100 years, 500 branches is a huge impact. All of that individual action adds up to something very sizable. And thirdly, in the beginning, Usha ma'am, Bhuvaneshwari ma'am were telling me about, how you've been representing in the COPs, and more to network, lesser on policy. I feel the All India Women's Conference need to engage in policy. And I think you'll be very powerful voices there. We have very few credible voices, ma'am. I'm just because I'm in Delhi, I sit in a number of these policy conversations in the government, in roundtables. And people talk off their hats. People speak from completely bookish knowledge. Here's an organization that has 100-year knowledge base working on the ground. I think I would very strongly urge that AIWC needs to engage on policy. With whatever little I can do sitting in Delhi, very happy to contribute. And I only see that scaling, ma'am. There will be no alien, very high-tech solution that will appear. We will individually have to cut down our consumptions and our waste generation, and then we will have to, as a society, scale that. There is no other way, no better way, no worse way. Ma'am.
So we would like to welcome you to our head office and show you our premises. And we are following lots of the principles of this waste management and all. So I'm sure that you will be happy to see. And I welcome you to our head office someday, since we are there in Delhi itself.
I would love to do that, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would like to say that yesterday not yesterday, day before yesterday, we had a meeting here on Wayanad disaster. There is an organization, CWRDM. There was a scientist who does this warning, and so he was taking the class, and what he said was, early warnings was there for. Some warning was there for Wayanad as well. But the thing has been that 4 to 5 years they have been hearing this warning. Every year this warning comes, the rains have reached this much threshold level. So you have to evacuate. But every year they do go, but nothing happens. It's like, so this year it really happened. So many people refuse to go despite the early
Warning.
warning. I mean, not that exactly completely early warning, but there was an indication, but they did not heed to it. Many people, because every year, हर साल तो ये होता ही है,
जी.
warning आता है, nothing happens. But this year it really happened. So the importance of community awareness and sort of raising the awareness comes into it. They have to be made to heed to the directions. So that is what I learned yesterday. So now, is anybody, Asha ji, unmute करके बोलिए please. Asha ji, yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Anshu. That was a very enlightening talk. And I feel very passionately about the environment and the way we are going about. But I share the same concern. I voice my thought what Dr. Upasana just said. In the name of development, we are going all berserk and destroying nature and putting ourselves at risk. I remember I didn't read the whole article, but about a week or 10 days ago, there was an article in the newspaper saying that the same calamity is heading towards Goa. The way Goa is going, what has happened in Wayanad, we haven't learned any lessons. Kedarnath, Joshimath, Uttarakhand. So we don't learn any lessons. Calamities happen. We lament for a few days. Articles are published. And then we go back to square one. So I don't think the government or man is going to be affected. It is all up to us individuals to take care and to make sure. But how much can one individual do? But what do you suggest? You just suggested that we form a forum and move up to the government, because we tried to participate in the Dwarka cutting of the trees to stop the cutting of the trees, but I don't see any success over there, and it's very disheartening and very depressing that we don't seem to achieve any results over there. So, as the pastor said, we'll invite you to our office and look forward to your collaboration and your guidance in whatever little way we can do, what we can do to stop and to protect ourselves and create awareness. I'm a grandmother. I see my grandchildren. They cannot live without the AC even for 5 minutes. You switch off the AC and they start grumbling, oh my God, it's so hot. Oh my God, it's so hot. And summers are equally bad. And even in this season, endurance level is at its lowest. This is the lowest level of endurance that our children have. Even schools have ACs and everything. So it's a sad state of affairs. I don't know where we are heading, which direction. And if you could give us any concrete, solid suggestion how to collaborate with the government and convey our message to them. I'm sure the government knows what they are doing. They know the loss of trees, the causes of the loss of trees. It's not that they are not aware of it, but then somebody has to implement it.
No, thank you, ma'am. Two thoughts you trigger, and thank you very much for that. One was when you talk of your grandchildren and air conditioners. It's just 2 days ago, I was having an argument with my own daughter, 9. She came back from school and said she had a headache, and her friends were all very upset, didn't want to go to school the next day because the AC had broken down. I said, the AC, I said, all my life in my school, there was no AC, right? No AC at all. And she looked at me as if I'm from some Stone Age or something, like that's the expression she had. Unbelievable piece. So we really need to fix a lot of things. But then more importantly on what we can do, I think one concrete thought that I can leave here, and I'm very happy to follow up, ma'am, is that India is right now as a country, we are in the process of drafting our national climate adaptation plan. The plan has to be prepared by next year. It is being led by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. And for one section, which is around climate and disasters, the National Disaster Management Authority has been asked to draft the chapter. They have invited non-profit organizations, research organizations, and the private sector to engage. I play a very small, tiny advisory role there as a volunteer. So let's start from there. And if you're up for this, let us get the All India Women's Conference on that drafting table, because that, and I know there are no women, I know there are no women's groups there, and I know that talking about all the values you bring about a gendered approach, about the concerns of women and children, but not just women. If you're a women's conference, it doesn't mean that you will only talk about women and children. There's so many complex things that are tied together that you bring to the table. Let us start from there. Let us give a solid contribution to the national plan. And from the national plan, after that, every state has a state action plan on climate change. It follows a similar template. I'm happy to pitch in and find out who the nodal officers are, and wherever we have branches, let us at least initiate one meeting, only one meeting per state, with the senior most official in the state action plan, holding authorities, which are usually the departments of environment. Let us try to get this. So then we can work at both ends. We have contributed to our state and national plans, saying the right thing, setting the right goalposts. We are trying to do very small things at our individual levels and group levels, and then our offices. Then we can at least try and bridge this from both ends. And I think that could be, it's a small start. It is more of a paperwork thing, but sometimes beyond doing what we do with our hands, it is important to engage. It is important to have that dialogue, get the right goals and objectives in state policy, so that we can bridge that gap. So, ma'am, that's one concrete thought that comes to mind.
So at least it's a beginning. We can make a beginning at least.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Someone else. Usha ji, would you like? Sujit ji, you're there?
Yeah, I would like to say something. Thank you so much for that excellent presentation. There were so many new things that we learned, like about the heat and how it is, the indoor heat is more than the outdoor heat, and how it is affecting the health of the family, more of women, children, and old people, sick people. So these were all very new information you have provided us, new points where we can. So I remember very recently I read about a project in Jodhpur. An NGO is doing this project. They found that houses in the older part of Jodhpur, with all traditional buildings, the inside temperature of the houses was much lower than the outside temperature, whereas in the city, as you mentioned, the indoor temperatures were very high and there were heat islands. So they wanted to find out the reason for this. So they did a very interesting thing. They went and interviewed the women staying in these areas for the traditional wisdom. We usually see that traditional wisdom is the repositories are women. They know what to do. So they talked to the women and they documented the whole process. And very interestingly, the Jodhpur city has formed an action plan, heat action plan. And the ideas given by these women were incorporated into that document, which was very interesting because these women are not part of any great climate movement or climate thing, but their opinion counted, and that got a place in the policy of the city. So something like this, and certainly the idea that you have given, it is an excellent idea, and that was something that we can engage in immediately because the process is on. And if we can become part of that process with your help, that will be very helpful. I am sure that Asha ji, who's a very senior member of AIWC, along with Upasana ji, is also here. I think Kalyani has just left the president. If you can speak to the president and get this moving, it will be very good. But then we have to do it immediately because time is short. And you were speaking about the state action plans. I'm in Trivandrum in Kerala. So a few years back, I think about just before COVID, there was discussion on the state action plan. That was a seminar organized by CANSA, which is Climate Action Network South Asia. So they had taken the initiative, and so they asked me to be one of the speakers, and they wanted me to review the draft state action plan for the gender aspect. But it was so surprising. I went through the whole report and I read it again and again. I would say there was no mention of gender. They said, you please talk about the gender and children. And there was no mention either about women or about children in the whole report. So I asked them, what do I speak on? There is nothing in this about gender or children. Then they said, you please say that. Say that this plan doesn't have anything about women and children, but you add it. But I don't think there is any improvement. As you just mentioned that in this particular committee that you are part of, there are no women groups. It is the same situation in every city and every state, I feel. Very few women's organizations are at the drafting table. But another reason could be that the women's organizations themselves are not taking the initiative to get themselves included at the policy level in the policy discussions. So it would be very helpful for us if you could advise us on the way forward, as Ashaji had just mentioned. And I'm sure it will be a very interesting journey for us also. And the other interesting part of your the presentation was about the work that you do with children, especially with schools and school children. It is very, very essential. We also try to do, because if you instill these learnings in the children, they carry it back to their families. And not only that, they grow up with these ideas which are proper. So as you mentioned, the children say they cannot live without air conditioning. For example, I'm just saying, if you tell them what are the harms of air conditioning, what are the harmful effect on climate and other things, I'm sure the children themselves will come out and say that, no, don't switch on the AC, we don't need the AC. And they must be taught of ways of how to overcome the heat crisis without switching on ACs. I think it is a very good thing to start with the children, and for that also, your ideas would be most welcome, and we would love to know what you are doing with the schools and with the school children. And a third point I wanted to make was we are talking about creating awareness. Awareness is very important. You have been doing that for many years. But then there is one aspect which I feel that sufficient awareness is not there in the community. We were talking about Wayanad. It is many years since Dr. Gadgil submitted a report on the situation in the Western Ghats. And he gave warnings and he gave so many recommendations and suggestions. But in spite of taking it seriously and doing things according to his recommendations, the whole society, I would say, across all the political parties, all the religious groups, everybody went up in protest, saying that he is suggesting something that will stop our development and we will not be able to do anything. Everybody was against it. Very few environmental groups were supporting him, but nobody else. And the government actually shelved it. And then they got another report prepared by another expert. But even that, they have not implemented in full. And interestingly, just before Wayanad happened, Dr. Gadgil's autobiography was being serialized in one of the leading Malayalam periodicals, Madhrubhumi. And I was reading with interest how he went into every community, interacted with the people, and how much of study had gone into his report. And he had specially pinpointed this area where this landslide has happened now, this Wayanad area. He had specially pointed out, saying that no further construction work should be taken up in this area and no further settlements should be allowed in this area. But that was overlooked, and now we see the result, what has happened. So I think there is need to create more awareness in the society about the expert studies and expert reports that come out. We hardly know anything. Even at the international level, if you talk about the IPCC report, at the grassroots level, nobody knows what is an IPCC report, what does it say. So if we can devise ways of simplifying these major documents and reports, And about even about the Gadgil report, if we had created sufficient awareness among the common people about what this report is about and how it was prepared and how what all recommendations are there, I'm sure the people would have taken up it as a cause and taken it forward. So that is something that we are lacking, and we should try to do some major work in spreading awareness about this also. These are the three things that I thought I would just share with you. And thank you again, Dr. Anshu Sharma, for your wonderful presentation and for all the new information that you have given us. Thank you.
Usha, what you just said, I was reading in the newspaper that now they have suggested that Kudumbashri take over the development of the Wayanad area because the women are sensitive, and now Kudumbashri is going to work over there and see how to stop further such landslides, etc. I may not be having the entire. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
So now, so we can take an example from here that if Kudumbashri can take over the Wayanad area and work on it, similarly, other areas which are going to be equally affected, the women's groups should be activated because my land, I know how to protect my house. I know how to protect my house because I am possessive about my house. I want my house protected. I want my house not destroyed. Similarly, the people, the locals who are living over there, the ones who get affected by such disasters, they should be involved to protect their land and to put their foot down and do whatever, take it further forward.
Yes, that is what I meant, that organizations like AIWC must take it up very seriously and start working at the grassroots level with the women and the families and the communities. So let us put our heads together and prepare some plan for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaji. One of our members, the member in charge, water conservation and sanitation, Bhanumati ji from Kakinada, she said she has not been able to participate today, but she has sent me a message to read it out. So it's about drought in her area. She says their area is prone to cyclones and floods during the peak period of July, October. And she is here speaking about an article in the IIT magazine, Madras magazine, where a study on drought was undertaken in 2015. And she wants to share that with all of you. It's in a village near Hyderabad, Mandola Gudam, a rocky terrain in Bhuvanagiri district of Telangana. There, they used hydrogeophysical data and constructed percolation tank. And within a year, the groundwater level had risen, and there was a solution to the droughts. So she wanted to bring this to the attention of everyone, and she wanted to share this as a remedy for droughts. The drought is also, as you said, one side there is a drought and the other side it's spreading. So that is what. Thank you, Bhanumati ji, for that valuable input, which I have shared now. Now, is there anybody else who would like to speak? Bridget ji?
Hanji Bhuvneshwari ji, yes, it was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. And Mr. Sharma, I'm also from Delhi. You have made us aware about the dark side of this city. But as Usha said, I agree with Usha that awareness is very important. But only thing is, unless the government comes forward, they understand, I don't think we'll be able to do anything. We are there to help the government, to cooperate with the government, to give suggestion to the government, but implementation has to be done by the government. Recently, you are aware that in Ghaziabad line, they were about to cut 1,100 trees to make road for the convenience of the Kavadias. So we people filed a petition also So, ultimately what happened, it was LG, he had given the oral orders to cut the 1100 trees, and the Supreme Court was also very harsh on that. But ultimately, they cut about 500 trees. And instead of feeling bad that they had cut 500 trees, they said we have saved about 600 trees because we didn't cut all the 1100. So government has to be sensitive. As you have correctly said, it doesn't affect the GDP. Unless it affects the GDP of the government is not going to come forward. So main thing, our main role is we should make the government aware about the disaster. They know what's happening around. What happened? You go to the hill stations now, full of these flats and all the hills. There's hardly any tree, any plant over there. And night time, it's full of fire. They burn all those trees at night and they sell that wood in the morning. So this is the attitude. The condition is really very bad. And the dark side which you have given, that we are going to face this temperature up to 58. I don't know what's going to happen to all of us, especially those people, those who don't have the facilities. Now, in olden times, I remember that there were no ACs and hardly the ceiling fans used to be there, because the construction of the house was in a particular way. The ceilings used to be very high. That's why there was hardly any heat. Now we are making this 90-story, 100-story buildings. Then how do you get all this, as Usha said, that women, they come forward with the ideas and all. What women can do if we are after money and we have become so much materialistic. So we have to come down, think about all these things, be sensitive, create awareness, make the government also aware about all these things. I remember this Bharati, she was the minister, and she resigned from that. And in one of the interviews at India Today, she said that I stopped them from using this Joshmat land because it is going to be disaster. But the industrialists and the government, they wanted money. They didn't bother for me, and I had to resign. So this is the condition. So I don't know. I mean, whether again we have to face this 58, and what our children are going to face, or our grandchildren are going to face in future, maybe 58 to 60 or 78. By your presentation, it was wonderful. It has really affected, at least it has affected me a lot, that what's happening, we were aware, but it has made us all the more sensitive that the dark side of the thing we are heading towards. So that's why immediate actions are required, and we must plan, sit, and think over that what we are going to do and how we are going to handle this disaster. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma, for all this information. Thank you, Dr. Bhuvaneshwari.
Thank you, Kunjit.
And my apology, I always call you Rameshwari, though it's Bhuvaneshwari.
But I take it, but no problem.
Somebody checked me also. They said, you please change, correct yourself. You always say Rameshwari, she's Bhuvaneshwari. But I always love Rameshwari. No problem.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much for arranging this webinar also. Very informative.
If anyone else would like to speak, or we can go to Shanti ji. Is there anybody else who would like to come in? Okay, we have Shanti Socrates. She's in charge of promotion of renewable energy and energy efficiency and conservation. We have several different, subjects under climate change related to climate change, and so she is one of the advisors. And I request Shanti Socrates to please report of thanks, please.
Thank you, Bhuvaneshwari ji. Good evening, everyone. Dr. Anshu Sharma ji, we have gained so much information, grasped so much. We were overwhelmed, but a bit scary too, thinking about our future. So we have come to realize that early warning can help reduce the damage caused by climate-related hazards by providing timely information to the people. These warnings are absolutely necessary and urgently needed, as climate change is causing more and more frequent, extreme, and unpredictable climate-related hazards. And if these warnings are issued within 24 hours, it is said that the damage can be reduced by 30%. And we have learned that public awareness and education are the key aspects of disaster mitigation. And we definitely need coordination, good governance, and appropriate action plan for the successful implementation of tackling climate emergency issues. It has been a pleasure to be part of this wonderful webinar, and on behalf of all the attendees, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Anshu Sharma, Climate and Disaster Management Specialist, for his extensive, insightful presentation. My heartfelt appreciation to all those who have contributed to make this webinar informative with their valuable inputs. I extend my sincere thanks to our President, Mrs. Kalyani Raj, for her thought-provoking presidential address, Mrs. Upasana Ji for her brilliant remarks, and patrons Mrs. Beena Jain and Sheila Kakteji for the gracious presence, and Mrs. Usha, Mrs. Asha, and Mrs. Kuljit for the apt remarks. I would fail in my duty if I do not mention the great effort put forth by Mrs. Bhuvneshwari Ravindran, MIC Climate Change, for organizing this webinar. Thank you all for joining us today and making this a productive webinar. And we look forward to such webinars in future also. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanti. Thank you. Special thanks to Dr. Anshu Sharma. Anyway, I'm sure that you will be cooperating, collaborating with Upasana has already told, and being in Delhi, it's easier. And our president is also very engaged in the climate change aspects. So I'm sure we'll take it forward with some, especially that policy making. What you suggested is really good. And if we can have that, in the national policy on climate change, so that will be very nice. Without wasting much time, we should. I will request Asna ji also to call you. I'll give your number to her, and I hope something will really. So
Certainly, ma'am.
AIWC, some voice will be heard, and some thoughts will be incorporated.
Ma'am, absolutely. We can make a resolution today that by 2025, India's national adaptation plan should have very robust input from the All India Women's Conference. It should be strong on its gender and related dimensions. And I'm sure we'll get there. And it's been a huge privilege. I still feel so glad that I could be here amongst you. Thank you so much for having me and making my Teachers Day really special.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And in other areas as well, we'll be taking your advice. Actually, you are the expert on these sort of things, and we need to be dependent on people like you to take forward activities. Thank you so much. Usha ji, you are muted.
Yes, I would. I wanted to suggest, Bhuvneshwari, that you please coordinate with our President Kalyani Raj and Dr. Anshu Sharma so that we can take this forward and do something concrete based on his. So thank you again, Dr. Anshu Sharma, and thank you all my friends who have joined from all different parts of the country. It's a pleasure to have you with us on our webinars. We have been holding these webinars regularly, though not so often after the COVID period. But we'll be having more interesting webinars. Our next webinar is on Saturday, that is on the 7th of September, continuing our series on culture and literature of the G20 countries. So this time again, we are focusing on the tribal culture and literature. I think maybe on the Tamil Nadu region. Last month, we spoke about the Kerala tribes. This time it is going to focus on a different area and the different tribal setup. I hope all of you will join. We'll be circulating the link today. Please do join us on 7th Saturday at 4:30. So thank you all, and we'll end the meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Usha and Bhuvneshwari.